Karma struck back. My ex-GF, who cheated with another guy, got pregnant, and dumped by him right after. This happened to me about a year ago, and my current girlfriend encouraged me to post here and share my experience with my cheating ex and how my life has never been better. My therapist also agrees, so here we go. Throwaway because I am pretty sure my ex knows my main Reddit account. I, 25M, was dating my ex-girlfriend. Let's call her Jess, 24F, for 4.5 years. We met at university as she was in my business management class. We got put together on a huge project for the semester and we just sort of clicked, and after we finished the project I asked her out, and she said yes. Those first few years together were absolute bliss. We were all lovey-dovey with each other and overall everything just felt right between us. We rarely argue and we never got into fights. We communicated clearly and openly with each other. I really thought she was the one that I was going to spend the rest of my life with. Hell, I was saving up to buy her a ring, but here I am. During the last half year of our relationship, she began to grow distant and was constantly making excuses on why we couldn't hang out together as much. Both of us, of course, were out of university and we had begun working full-time jobs, so I thought this was normal. Note, we never were living together, but then soon enough she was starting to turn down intimacy. For some background info, I and she have very high drives. We normally would go at it at least once a day. I always wore protection and she was on the pill because neither of us was ready to have kids, thank God. One night we decided to spend the night at her place. I tried to initiate intimacy and of course, she turned it down. This was really beginning to piss me off and I voiced my frustrations to her, but she just said that she wasn't feeling comfortable with her body at the time and asked to give her some space when it came to initiating intimacy. I agreed and we both went to bed. Or at least she did. I just had this gut feeling in my stomach that something was off and I went to snoop on her phone once I knew she was asleep. Yeah, I know this is bad, but I don't regret it one bit, and found out that she was hooking up with her serial cheating ex, 24M. Found messages, pictures, and full-blown videos of them ducking. The videos ducking destroyed me. In those videos she was acting and saying things that really made me look at her as nothing more than a waste of space and a girl. At that very moment, all I could feel was hatred towards her. I looked down at her as she was sleeping and all I could feel was visceral disgust. I then took screenshots of all the messages and sent them to me, including the other pics she sent him, not the videos though. I couldn't bear to send those. I quietly took whatever belongings I still had at her apartment and took them out to my car and went back to my apartment. In the morning she called me and asked me where I was and I just gave her a quick believable excuse and she bought it. Now here is some background info. Now let me introduce you to one of my close childhood friends. Let's call her Julia, 21F. Julia and I were really close throughout our childhood, through high school. I and her brother are best friends. They live a block away from my parents' home and where I grew up. Now about a year after me and Jess get together, I returned back to my hometown for my cousin's wedding and began hanging out with my old friends, including Julia and her brother. During that night she confessed that she had feelings for me. I turned her down and told her that I already had a girlfriend. She was very understanding and apologized, and after that, we didn't really talk as much as I didn't want to give her any indications that I was interested in a relationship with her since I was dating Jess. She was fine with this and understood it with no issues at all. She doesn't use social media, so the only way we would talk is over iMessage. During that time I took a lot of photos of all of us hanging out with each other again. I went back to the university about a week later and I showed Jess where I was and who I was with, as she was interested in seeing who I hung out with during my trip. Whilst we were scrolling through images, a picture of me and Julia popped up. She began to ask questions about her and who she was. I already explained to her that she was a childhood friend of mine and that during the trip she confessed feelings for me, but I shut her down and I showed her the text messages to back it up. And overall she seemed fine with that. About a year later, during a little argument she confessed to me that she was very insecure about her body and that she grew very insecure after seeing pictures of Julia because Julia had a very slim figure and looked gorgeous. I did my best to calm her fears, but I think in the end she never really got over that. Now back to the story. I messaged my parents back in my hometown and asked them if I could stay at their place for the upcoming week, as I have some important things to discuss with them, and they were worried but agreed. I've been telling Jess that I was going down to see my parents as I haven't seen them in a while. I want to visit them and she didn't bat an eyelid at that. I went to work and met with my boss and explained to him the entire situation, and I asked for a little break, and he told me to take as much time as I need and come back when I'm ready. I went on my way down there during the weekend and told my parents everything. They were truly disgusted with her actions, and my mom told me that if I ever took her back, she was not allowed at their house ever. I told my mom not to worry, I had enough self-dignity to not ever take her back. I then messaged Julia and asked if she and I could talk. She agreed and I went over to her apartment. I explained everything that I found out about Jess. I don't know what happened, but I think at that very moment everything kind of hit me and I began to cry profusely, not only because I lost someone I loved, but the fact that I wasted so much time on her and I would never get that time back. Julia was there to console me throughout my entire breakdown. After a little while I calmed down, she brought out some drinks and we just drank, watched movies, and played Mario Kart till about 2 a.m. At this point, we were both quite tipsy, to say the least, and I couldn't really go back to my parents' place. She offered me to stay the night and I did. We went to her room and one thing led to another and we were making out on her bed. Just before we took off our clothes, she told me to take out my phone and to start recording. As you can probably guess, we did the deed quite a few times that night. The entire time we were doing it, Julia was yelling out derogatory things about Jess like, "This kitty is so much tighter than that filthy girl's," stuff like that. After our last go, I went and stopped recording and we went to bed. I woke up the next day to the smell of her making breakfast and we ate together. I asked her why she wanted me to record what we did last night and she said that she wanted to help me get some payback. I never once mentioned getting revenge on Jess, but I guess Julia knows me pretty well and knows that I would want to get some revenge just for treating me this way. She told me to just send her the audio file from the recording and break up with her. She told me that she still has feelings for me and will wait for me to sort everything out with Jess. I told her I can't promise her anything and she said that was fine, she just wanted me to know. After that, we said our goodbyes and I went back to my parents' home and they were kind of worried, asking where I was last night. I told them me and Julia were just catching up. My parents were relieved, but as my parents got ready for work, my dad had a small smirk on his face. Guess he knows what I was doing that night. I went onto my computer and downloaded the video from my phone and edited the video to just audio and a black screen. Once that was done, I spent the rest of the weekend with my friends partying and having fun, as well as spending a lot of time with Julia and maybe having intercourse a few times as well, this time no recording. I informed my boss that I would be returning to work in about a week and he said that was perfectly fine, best boss ever. I then texted Jess that I knew she was hooking up with her ex and I sent all the screenshots. My last message to her ever was, "Treat me like a game and I will show you how it's played," and I attached the audio of me and Julia having sex and then blocked her. Over the next few days I was getting spam calls and spam messages from a bunch of our mutual friends and her family. I sent them all the screenshots of the text messages that I had and it was radio silence for the most part after that. Her parents called me and apologized for their daughter's behavior and that was that. Where I am now about 1 year later. I just had my 26th birthday with my family and girlfriend of close to 1 year, Julia, who is now 22. I recently got a promotion at my work and Julia just moved in with me and she is going to graduate in a little over a week from now. She transferred over to the university I went to for her final year. I have a constant workout schedule. I am now 5 feet 11 inches 165 pounds. I was always pretty skinny while I was growing up. I have never felt more proud of myself and I feel genuinely cared for in ways that I have never felt before. Now for my ex, a friend told me that apparently she went through a huge crisis because after I dumped her she found out he was pregnant and her ex that knocked her up apparently ghosted her. I couldn't be the dad cause I never went raw on her. She had an termination and her life has been a mess ever since, has an alcohol obsession, and thanks to the video I sent her she now has huge body insecurity issues that has ruined most of, if not all, her relationships since. For her, I am the one that got away and for me she is the largest bullet I ever dodged. I still despise her because those 4.5 years we spent together are lost and I can never get them back. But I am living my best life and I couldn't be happier. My one piece of advice to anyone who has been cheated on: never settle for someone that doesn't respect you. The world is your oyster, go out and live your best life. I caught my cheating wife and ruined her family business. This is a decade ago. My wife of 17 years was working for her family business, mother and stepfather. I had a job with global responsibilities, so I traveled a lot. This was something we accepted and worked around. Whenever possible, I would participate and support her in business functions. One spring day, I was golfing with my wife in their company tournament. We were paired with two suppliers from different companies. Lisa was attractive and in her early 30s, married, with two young children. Carl was in his late 40s, divorced, about 6 feet 5 inches tall, and around 150 pounds, with a head the size of a watermelon. They were carrying on and acting a little too friendly. I mentioned to my then wife that they were having an affair. She laughed and said, "No way." My professional life is based on rapid personality analysis, so I made sure I talked to Carl afterwards to get a better sense of who he was. In my entire life, I have taken an instant and profound dislike to 5 people. Carl was one of them. For several months around that time, my wife and I had been in counseling because my relationship with my in-laws was very strained throughout our marriage, and they often manipulated her into believing I was against her career. She fasts forward a year. My wife was increasingly distant and drinking too much, often with her mother and stepfather. We were sleeping in separate rooms. She dropped the "I love you, but I am not in love with you." I was the type of husband who paid all the bills without looking too much into the details. On the way to the airport, I stuffed a bunch of bills into my laptop bag. Bored on a 4-hour flight, I opened up the cell phone bill and noticed my wife having lengthy conversations with 2 different numbers with a West Coast area code. Something immediately struck me about the dates, and I noticed many of these conversations were late at night when I was out of town. I felt the onset of a panic attack. We had 2 sons and survived several tragedies already. When I landed, I called the first number. It was Company X where Carl worked. I knew the other number was him, so I called the number from the hotel phone, and he answered by identifying himself by name. I just blurted out "wrong number" and went into the bathroom to throw up. When I got home 4 days later, I put a keystroke logger onto our home computer. That gave me the passwords and information I needed. It turns out my wife was talking to Carl about moving out to be with him, that she was certain I would just let her take my sons 3 time zones away, blah blah. 2 mornings after my return, I printed off all the evidence and asked her to follow me to a local garage because I wanted my car to be looked at because the brakes sounded like they needed replacing. As we drove to a local coffee shop, I asked to borrow her phone, pretending mine was dead. She gladly passed it over. I found and dialed his number, putting it on speakerphone. He answered very cheerily, "Hey sweetie, what's up?" Leaning over to grab the phone, she pushed the wheel violently, and we ended up screeching into an industrial plaza. I slammed the brakes and held the phone away from her. "No, Carl, I'm not sweetie, it's my name," he stuttered and stammered and said, "Oh hey friend, how are things with you?" I replied, "I am not your ducking friend Carl. You are having an affair with my wife and I know all about it." She flipped out and I dropped the phone, which she scrambled to turn off. Then the truth came out. She had been having an affair with Carl. My a-hole in-laws aided and abetted their affair by providing their cottage for their flings. They had dinner with my in-laws as a deceitful, fake couple. Carl was having an affair with Lisa at the golf tournament and broke up that marriage before turning his attention to my wife. He was a serial cheater who targeted married women. After several years of litigation, we did get divorced. Her relationship with Carl did not last. She eventually remarried a very nice guy who also, somehow, ended up hating the in-laws. We actually get along very well now, and we both have solid relationships with our grown sons, because I took the high road and never dragged her name in the mud with them. I am also remarried to a wonderful woman who would never cheat on me in a million years. My new in-laws think the world of me, as I do of them. Life lesson: when you have the worst in-laws in the world, they can really duck up your relationship. Karma: the former in-laws are pushing 80 and totally broke after being sued into oblivion by business partners they ripped off. Only one of their combined 5 adult children still talks to them. I snooped and found out that my wife of 3 years has been living a sad double life and is not who I thought she was. Since my wife and I got married 3 years ago, things have been off. I know that people grow and change with time, but around our wedding, my wife changed drastically. She bleached her dark brown hair blonde right before the ceremony, and I honestly thought I was in the wrong church for a split second when she came down the aisle. We moved into our house right after the honeymoon, and she went into full domestic mode. We'd shared cleaning duties before, but once we moved into the house, she became insistent on doing everything before I could even get to it. Since this is our first house, I thought it was some kind of homeowner nesting thing, but it never stopped. Her hair color is none of my business, and I think most people would be happy not to have to clean, so I honestly didn't really think much of either of those things at the time. The big thing has always been how closed off she got after the wedding. When we were dating, she'd tell me long rambling stories about her feelings and rant to me when she was upset and all that, and I liked hearing about what was going on inside her head. After the wedding, that stopped pretty abruptly. If I ask her how her day is, she will only ever tell me that it was fine or super. She doesn't talk to me about her feelings anymore, ever, even when I explicitly ask, "How do you feel about X?" She also stopped telling me about anything important that happened to her. About a year after we got married, her grandfather died. Did she tell me she'd lost her grandfather? No. She told me that she had to go to a conference for work on the other side of the country, which I thought nothing of. On the second day she was gone, her older brother texted me to tell me that my in-laws had really missed seeing me at the funeral. When I called her to ask why in the ever-loving hell she didn't tell me, and then lied about it, all she would say was, "I didn't want to trouble you. You have a lot on your plate." After that, she went on a couple of spontaneous family trips. She's really close to her family, so the first time she said she was going camping with her brother at their alma mater, I didn't think a lot of it other than to be slightly disappointed and confused that I wasn't invited, because her brother's cool and the three of us go camping together a lot. But the second time, I started hearing alarm bells. I'd like to say I'm a more secure man, Reddit, but after the second spontaneous family trip, my wheels started spinning and I started to think that maybe she was cheating. This was a weird insecurity in the back of my mind for a while, since she wasn't showing any other big signs of cheating, she wasn't guarded about her phone and hadn't changed her routine/appearance. A few weeks ago, she told me she was pregnant. I was over the moon about it until I asked her how many weeks along she was, and she nonchalantly said about 12 or 13. She'd been pregnant for like 3 months before she even bothered to tell me. She's not really showing at all, and she doesn't usually drink, so I had been completely in the dark. I honestly hadn't even suspected. That was kind of it for me. I was sure she was cheating, and that it wasn't my kid. I thought there was no possible way that a woman would keep her pregnancy a secret from her husband for 3 months. So I snooped. Yes, I know I was wrong, but I wanted proof that she'd been having an affair before I moved out. One of my best buddies from college is a divorce attorney, and when I asked him what I should do, he sent me the info for a keylogger. I installed it on my wife's laptop and was prepared for the worst. Now, I feel like what I found is somehow worse than her cheating. I didn't find any steamy messages, but I found out that she keeps a diary in a Word document that she writes in every day. I know I should have just stopped once I knew she wasn't cheating, but once I saw my name in her diary, I couldn't stop. I read all of it. All 7 separate documents, going back to way before we'd even met. Turns out she's not cheating. She's depressed as duck, hates herself, and has absolutely no trust in me. All of the stuff I'd been confused and bothered by has some kind of sad, self-loathing explanation. She hates having blonde hair, but she writes, "I know he'd divorce me if I went back to being a brunette, because wives are supposed to be blonde almost every week. The wives are supposed to be thing is tangled up in everything." She thinks wives are supposed to be quiet, which is why she doesn't talk to me anymore. She thinks wives are supposed to make things easier for their husbands, not harder, which is why she didn't tell me when her grandfather died. It just goes on and on and on. She didn't tell me when she got a huge promotion and a raise because he'd leave me in a heartbeat if he knew I made more money than he does. Men can't handle that. It hurt to know that she thinks of me as some kind of one-dimensional 1950s husband, and I've been racking my brain to think of anything I could have done to make her think this way. What I can't handle is that she'd lied about the big stuff. I honestly don't know if I can forgive her for not telling me about the terminations. The spontaneous family trips were actually her termination. 2 of our children, one at 5 weeks, the other at about 10. She went and stayed with her parents while she was recuperating, and her brother and sister came to support her. But not me. I didn't get to be there for her, because she thinks I would leave her immediately if I knew that she'd killed our children. She's convinced that she caused both terminations because she smoked pot for a long time before we got married. For what it's worth, it sounds like her family tried both times to get her to tell me, but she wouldn't. She finally told me about this pregnancy because her parents threatened to tell me she didn't. I'm just absolutely dumbfounded. I don't even know what to think right now. I'm just so baffled because everything she says about me in her diary is insanely nice. She goes on for pages and pages about how much she loves me and how she thinks I'm her soulmate and how she would do anything for me. I just can't understand why she thinks that I would leave her. Knowing that she's spent the last 3 years walking on eggshells around me, convinced that I would leave her at the drop of a hat is just so confusing and awful. I feel like our marriage is some kind of lie. The woman I thought was self-confident and ready to take on the world is actually full of self-loathing and really depressed. I don't know her at all. She's been suffering silently with depression long before we met. She has no faith in me, no trust. She thinks that every hug and kiss I give her and every I love you I say is a lie. I just don't know what to do. She obviously needs serious help, but I don't know how to get it for her. I can't tell her that I read her diary. If she has zero trust in me now, I can't even imagine what she'd think if she knew if I read 6 years' worth of her private thoughts. I feel like I need to get my in-laws on board somehow, but I don't know what to say to them. I know I can't ignore this, but I feel like any move is the wrong move. What do I do? Edit: after I posted this I realized I'd kind of omitted the deal with the keylogger. It's worse than it sounds, honestly. After it showed me what she'd written that day I went onto her computer while she was sleeping and opened up Word. I saw that she had several documents called Diary Year X, so I downloaded them all onto a flash drive and read them at work. I went too far, I know.